Good afternoon. I'm Doug Smith with Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, and like we introduced ourselves this morning, I'm a behavior consultant, so I work with the special ed department. My career started at Buckhorn Children's Center. I worked there for 13 years in a PRTF, psychiatric residential treatment facility with boys aged 12 to 17. Then I worked at the K through 12 Buckhorn School for 8 years, and then I've been up here since then. So we'll go ahead and get started this afternoon. Our session is going to be called Behavior 101. And some of this will be repeat information that you've heard throughout the day. If you've been in Miss Rachel Zhanga's presentations, some of it will be a repeat from that. Some of it will be a repeat from explicit instruction this morning, which I didn't realize was going to happen. So we're going to work through this. And first off, one thing I want to point out, in your books, in your totes, whatever they're called, you have this book, The First Days of School. And in this book, the most important unit in this book will be Unit C, which is all about behavior and classroom management. So, has anyone got one of these already? Okay, good. So this is a great resource for you to have. All right, that's it, done. All right, so first off, let's look at this. So there's some of our talking points that we're going to be discussing briefly today. Why are we here? What is behavior? And then we're going to be looking at ABCs of behavior, some common sources of behavior, factors that influence behavior of the students that we work with. We're going to be looking at tiers of intervention, what is classroom management, and responding to minor disruptions. So first off, we're going to talk about is, why are we here? Why would we but why would we want to do a small presentation on behavior and call it Behavior 101? Right, very good. Right, you have to have that behavior under control and managed before learning can take place. You have to get the behavior under control before academics can take place. Very good, good point. Pardon? Prevention, right. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about later on, is we're going to be talking about Tier 1 interventions, which is all prevention. It's all proactive instead of reactive. We put things into place to make sure that the classroom is managed appropriately, besides reacting to everything. Also, the reality of the job that you're in, are you going to have kiddos that lose their composure at times, I guess you could say? So try to be nice. Right. Reality of the job that you're in, you're going to have kids that lose it. I mean, they're going to be upset. They're going to be, anxious, nervous, excited. All kinds of things are going to happen in your classroom. So you want to be prepared for that. And the reality of the kids that we work with, not just special ed kids, but regular ed kids as well, is that we have to have some way that we can build a relationship with those kiddos, that we can have something to talk to them about when they are having their difficulties or their meltdowns or their stressful situations. So it's important that you learn to build those relationships. I think one of the keys to any classroom and any career that you have is to be able to build a relationship with the kids and the folks that you work with. Not only the students that you work with, but you're going to have to build those relationships with the staff as well. So the reality of the fact is that we need to learn proactive strategies to deal with behavior incidents instead of reactive strategies. So what is behavior? It's an action. Okay. It's a response to an emotion or a response to an action. All right. A response to a stimulus, right. As it is an action. It's something that we can actually see. It's measurable, observable, and objective. We can count how many times little Dougie gets up out of his seat and walks across the room. All right? That's measurable. We can see what's going on. We can all agree that, yep, that's getting out of his seat and walking across the room. So that's observable and it's objective. Now, what about, I think he's angry. Is angry a behavior? No, why not? Emotion. It's an emotion, right. It's not an action. Behaviors are the actions that our students have. What about, think about it, what's some other things that we would consider as what behavior is?
The way that like a student would act.
The way a student acts, all right. So, all right, without giving it away. If you go into a classroom and you sit down, you're going to what something? You're going to learn something, hopefully, right? So behavior is learned. Our students learn how to behave from the environment that they come from their surroundings, right? So when they come into school, what do we have to do? We have to teach them the behavior that we want to see. So behavior is learned. So if behavior is learned, inappropriate behavior is learned. Can appropriate behaviors be learned? Appropriate behaviors can be taught. So we need to think about that and say, yeah, I'm sorry, the environment you come from. So all behavior is learned. One way or the other, that behavior is learned or influenced. Behavior is an action. Like you said, it's observable and measurable. And like I said, we all agree on what that behavior looks like. Angry, those emotions are not actions. So behavior is not what a student is feeling, but how the student expresses that feeling. Again, going back to the emotions, that we can all express anger different ways. Sometimes when I get angry and upset, I'll cry. If I cry, am I angry or am I sad? So which one of those emotions am I exhibiting? So a behavior is an action that you see. And behavior serves two purposes. What two purposes do behavior serve? What do we get out of the way that we act or our actions?
You either get what you want or you avoid it.
You're right. You get something, or you get out of something, or you avoid something. So that's the reason for it. If you boil it all down, the reasons that we have behaviors or exhibit these behaviors is because we get something out of that behavior or we avoid something from that behavior. Well, Dougie throws a book in the floor because it's math time and he can't stand math. What's he doing? And the teacher throws him out into the hallway, asks him to leave the classroom. I'm avoiding having to do that math work, and I'm getting out of that assignment as well. So you either getting something or avoid something. We come to work. I came to work today to get that paycheck. So there you either getting something or avoid something. So think about it. All right, any questions? Okay, so now we're looking at behavior. When we look at behavior as antecedent behavior and a consequence. We oftentimes when we're looking at it, all we see is the behavior. We don't think about what led up to that behavior, and we don't think about how we responded to that behavior. But if we look at our behavior is measurable and observable. It's something that we can see, something that we can count, something that we can all agree upon. Okay, so what set that behavior into motion? What was the stimulus that put that behavior into motion? What was the antecedent? What happened immediately before that behavior? If I'm sitting at my desk and you ask me to open the book to page 3 and I drop the book in the floor, what was the behavior? Dropped the book in the floor. What was the antecedent? You asked me to turn to page 3, exactly. I dropped the book in the floor, you come over, pick the book up and set it back on my desk. That's the consequence. The consequence is what happened immediately after that behavior. A lot of times we think about consequence as rewards or punishment, but a consequence is how you respond to that behavior. So in that scenario, the consequence was you picked the book up, put it back on my desk, and probably gave me a little bit of attention. So our antecedents happens immediately before the behavior. The behavior is the measurable, observable, objective action that we have or that we see, and a consequence what happens immediately after our behaviors. A lot of times we think about consequences, like I said, we think about punishment. Punishment is something that decreases the likelihood of a behavior happening again, while a reinforcer or reward increases that likelihood of that behavior happening again. And punishments and rewards are from the student's point of view. Not from your point of view, but from the student's point of view. It may be rewarding to me that when I throw my book in the floor, you come over and provide me with some attention. So what behavior are you rewarding? Dropping that book in the floor. That's going to happen again. That's going to increase the likelihood of that happening again. If you ignore that behavior and you don't pay me that attention or provide me with that guidance, then I'm not going to do that again because it didn't get what I wanted. It did not provide me with that attention, so that was a punishment. So just remember, consequences is how you respond to a behavior, and a reward or reinforcer is if it increases the likelihood of the behavior, and a punishment is if it decreases the likelihood of that behavior. A lot of times we think if we are fussing or arguing or reprimanding a student, that's a punishment. But for that kiddo that doesn't get any attention at home or anywhere else, that is a reward because you're providing them with that attention that they're needing. So be very cautious with what you reward and how you respond to difficult behaviors or to behaviors that you'll see. So we're going to look at some common sources of behavior. When we're talking about common sources of behavior, we're looking at 3 types of behaviors. Well, not 3 types, but 3 sources of behavior. They're carry in, carry over, and tune in. Carry in behaviors are those things that our students bring with them into the classroom. We have no control over those settings or no control over those environments or no control over what happened to that student earlier in that day or the last night or over the weekend. They carry these things into the classroom with them. So could anyone give us an example of what a carry-in behavior would be? What would cause a student to come into your classroom and be upset and have an episode with you? Could be. Good. Could be something that happened when they got home. Elaborate on that. What's something that could cause them to have an outburst in your classroom?
I don't know, like we have said over, I didn't want to go home with a friend and the mother wouldn't play it on, or I don't know, just a parent not even being there to, you know, like when it's not there to support them. You have a lot of parents that these kids have to get themselves up and get ready, and then he's just got anger issues.
All right.
They come in and act out for that reason.
Good, right. Good, could be. No, you're right. It could be. It could be what it is. It could be something that what social media, something that somebody said on Facebook about them, something that somebody posted, something that someone said earlier in the week about them. So those are things that are outside of our control. We can't control what happens when they go home. We can't control what happens when they get off the bus or before they get on the bus. So they bring those things with them. That's upset. They're upset about something that happened last night. Sometimes our kiddos, with the recent flooding and things like that, they're going to have some of those behaviors bring with them because, I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. I don't know what I'm going to wear tomorrow. I don't know where I'm going to get clean water from. So mom and dad's arguing, or parents are arguing, grandparents or caregivers are not in the picture any longer. We've lost everything, so they're going to bring those anxious moments with them, and there's nervous moments with them. They're going to bring that into the classroom with them. So those are things that they carry into the classroom. Now, carryover behaviors are things that we have a little bit of control over. They happen within the school environment or the educational environment. So anyone think of an example of a carryover behavior? Just think about it. It carries over. So what could be an example? Very good. Issues with another teacher. Right. Mr. Denny Paul wouldn't let me chew gum in his classroom. Everyone else lets me chew gum, and he wouldn't let me chew gum. I'm going to take it out on everybody. So he upset me first thing this morning, so guess what? Everybody's going to have a bad day because I'm upset over that. Who's the first person our kiddos usually see? Bus driver. Who sets the mood for the day? Bus driver, right. And if that bus driver gets that kid off on a sour foot and he's upset about something, guess who's going to catch it all day long? And then when he gets back on the bus that evening, he's thought about it all day, the bus driver's going to catch it on the way home too. So a lot of times that happens, stuff will happen on the bus, or someone that first sees the kid may set them off on a bad foot or set them off in a bad mood. And they carry that out throughout the day. It's unresolved issues that are in our immediate environment that are carried over from setting to setting. Carried over from the bus to the hallway, to the breakfast, to your classroom, back to the cafeteria again, Those are things that are unresolved that we have control over. A lot of times we separate the kids. So you go over there and sit, you go over there and sit. I handled that. But did you handle that situation? Did you resolve that problem? No. So that is just going to keep carrying over from setting to setting to setting. All right. Tune-in behaviors. What do you think tune-in behaviors are?
Feed off your energy. Feed off your energy. You're in a bad mood, they're in a bad mood.
Could be. Could be. If we think about it, I like thinking about it as like listening to a radio, listening to a song. A song comes on, I'm not going to say from my high school days because, well, that's a few years ago, probably 5. But anyway, tune-in behaviors like you hear a song comes on, you know exactly what you were doing when that song first came out. You tune into that memory. Okay, so some of our kids have these tune-in behaviors. If a bell ringing, the sound of a bell could cause a tune-in behavior. That could cause them a past traumatic reminder of something that happened to them, and they may act nervous or anxious, or they may start acting out because of the sound of the bell. So what could be other things that would trigger tune-in behaviors?
They see you interacting with another student in a situation they've been in the past.
Oh, that's very good. Yes, very good. We don't know what's happened to them in the past, but the way that you're interacting with another student may remind them.
Up to defend, you'll have gain on your end.
Yes, yes, very good. Right. The way that you interact, your affect that you carry yourself with other students. Very good. One of my favorite, you know, I can remember Thanksgiving, what it smelled like in Mom's house, Mother's house. And, sorry. And that smell takes me back to when I'm 6, 7, 8 years old, sitting there and Mom been up all night cooking and, you know, and watching the parade on TV and things like that. Now, man, just that is just, you know, it just takes me back to that time. And that's what tune in does. It tunes you into a time that something happened to you. It would be positive or negative. You know, so it could be a smell, could be a sound, like I said, the bell. What about a color? I had a young man I worked with. If he wore red, then he had a bad day. And oh no, if I wore red, he had a bad day because he associated the color red with something negative that happened in his life. And if I had a red shirt on, I was in a bad mood. And so he had a bad day because he kept pushing buttons until he got me to respond in a negative way. And he always associated the color red with something happened bad with him. And so when I had red on, he had a bad day. So tune-in behaviors are those things that you have no control over. You usually don't know what caused that behavior to happen. So carry in, they bring it with them. Carry over, it's within our environment from one setting to the next within our school environment, educational environment. And tune in are those things that kiddos hear, reminds them of past experiences, and they respond appropriately in whatever manner it was that they, the sound that it, or whatever they tuned into, what they were doing at that time. So some factors that influence the behavior of our students are our diagnosis, their educational eligibility. If we look at our kiddos and we look at the diagnosis that our students have, we need to look at, okay, so with this diagnosis of ADHD, what does the student have to do? How long is class periods? 70? Right. Yeah. So, right, so if I get ADHD, can I sit for longer than probably 30, 45 minutes? Well, I mean, I can't do that as it is. No, I can't do that. Yeah, so you just got to be aware of the diagnosis that your students have and be aware of how that impacts their educational level as well. You know, if you've got students that has a specific learning disability in reading, are they going to be able to read grade level materials and understand that? Possibly not. So you're going to have to make those accommodations for that student, still get the content, but allow them to be able to read that on their level. Just understand the symptoms and predictable behaviors of students that have certain diagnoses with them as well. Our next one would be medication, illnesses, and allergies. You know, some of our kiddos are on medications, you know, and allergies. Oh my gosh, man, I got up a couple mornings ago, head stopped up, nose all runny and stuff, and I was like, how in the world your head stop up and your nose run at the same time? I don't know how that works, but I was like, oh, I feel horrible. So, you know, I had a rough day because my allergies. I was grouchy and grumpy, and everybody around me had a bad day as well. That was that tune-in behavior. When my head started hurting, everybody going to have a bad day. So also medications, like I said, I had a young man that was on the medication that he was on made him have to drink a lot of water. So if you drink a lot of water, what do you have to do? You have to go to the bathroom. And so, you know, I understood those medications, and the other teachers that worked with him, no, you go one time. You go between class, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, y'all either let him go or he's going to find an inappropriate place to go. So, you know, you need to make sure that you know what those medications are and the side effects of those medications. I had a young man, he would come in, he'd get to school at 7:45, 9 o'clock he'd have to take a nap. From 9 to 9:30, I don't care what we did. We walked the hall, we drank coffee, we had Mountain Dew, we washed our face in cold water. 9 o'clock he was out because the medication that he was on kicked in really strong at that time, and he went to sleep. You know, after you could either fight with him for 30 minutes, try to keep him awake, and he'd go to sleep anyway, or let him get his little 30-minute nap in. And then as soon as he woke up, I'm sorry, I'm ready to get all my work done. And he'd get caught back up with everyone else and keep going. So just be aware of some of those medications. Cognitive abilities, not only look at the way our students think, but they looks at the understanding of the words that you're using. Do our students comprehend what you're saying? Can they understand how you're talking to those students? I had one kiddo, he called it teacher talk. I was explaining something, another kid explained it the same exact way, used the same exact words, but he couldn't understand me because I used teacher talk. So his cognitive ability was, I'm tuning you out because you're an authority figure. I'm not listening to you, but I'll listen to a peer. So those cognitive abilities, are you using words that your students understand and using on their level? You know, with our little fellows, you know, we got to get down to their level, right? Our younger kiddos. So some of our special ed kids, we got to get on their level as well and present information on their level. Emotional capabilities. You know, some of our kids are going to have these, have difficulty with different things throughout the school day. You know, some kids that are anxious or nervous, anxiety, lunchtime may be a really rough time for them because they don't like big crowds. They don't like all the noise, all the hustle and bustle, everything that's going on. It's so, it's chaos to those kids. So, you know, how do they handle that situation? But you need to work with your kids and let them know that the emotions that they feel in certain situations, that's a normal or appropriate. You know, like with the flooding thing, you know, the kids are going to be sad, maybe upset, anxious, scared. You know, rationalize, normalize all those emotions that they're going through and let them know that is understandable. I would feel the same way if that happened to me. You know, so, but this is how we're going to work through this. Look at your physical attributes. You know, most of the kids in the classroom, the big kids, are ones that are maybe bullied. Little fellows get picked on quite a bit, you know, so look at the physical attributes of the kids that you work with. Also with the physical attributes, it takes into hygiene, takes into health, takes into all those considerations. You know, kids are cruel when it comes to picking on and talking to and you know, bullying kids. I mean, they're cruel, man. It's rough out there, but the hygiene, the physical appearance, some of our kids may be suffering from chronic illness as well. And, you know, we're worried about that kiddo being here every day. So, you know, if they have a chronic illness and some days they may have to miss school or miss class, be understanding of that and provide them with an opportunity they can make that work back up. And just be understanding, show them empathy if at all possible. Social factors that we got to take into place are socioeconomic factors. You know, not all the kids are going to come to school and have the same exact shoes or same exact clothing, right? So, and then also you got to look at the environment they're coming from as well. Yeah, I went to a classroom and did an observation around Mother's Day, and they were doing Mother's Day cards and all these things, you know, for Mother's Day, which was great. But this little kid had 2 daddies, didn't have a mom, you know. And I was like, you know, it was like, don't you want to make a Mother's Day card? And she's like, I don't have a mommy. And I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that, you know. So those things like that. Even with the, also with that, think about, Miss Rachel was talking earlier about the culture that our kids come from. Not all kids celebrate all the holidays that we celebrate. So just think about those social factors as well. And then group dynamics. When we talk about group dynamics, just like you in your group that you're in, you have leaders. Those are the ones that kind of control the classroom or control the environment, control the group that you're in. Lieutenants are the ones that back everybody up, support the leader. Members are those folks that are happy to be in your classroom. How many of our classes have got, most of them are members. They're happy to be there, right? You can think about your classrooms, think about your school. You have 1 or 2 kids that are the leaders. They kind of control everybody else. The lieutenants are the ones that I'm going to back them up. I'm going to do what they ask. Members are happy to be there in the classroom. Status seekers are the ones that you got to kind of be nervous about. The status seekers are just what it is. They don't know where they belong in this pecking order, so they're going to act out. They're going to cause you probably most problems because they want the leaders to look at them and acknowledge them. They may not know the rules and expectations yet, so they're going to do whatever they can to fit into this pecking order. And our last little fellows that we talk about are scapegoats. Those are the ones that get picked on. They're the ones that get blamed. They're the ones that usually want to sit right by you. They're the ones that usually want to come and tell on everyone because they're scared to death of that group setting. And our kids don't understand how those group dynamics change from setting. We do as adults. I know when I can be the leader, and I know when I have to be the most times status seeker, but I know when I am the member as well. So, and I'm perfectly comfortable with that member role because I don't have to be in charge of anything. I just got to follow along everybody else, and that keeps me out of trouble most of the time. Trauma and adverse childhood experiences. Has anyone had trauma trainings before? So, sort of, kind of, maybe? Yeah, so trauma looks at a life-threatening or perceived life-threatening event or a sexual violation of a person from that person's point of view. Trauma is what is viewed as that person as being traumatic. I can't look at you and say, oh, I'm sure that was traumatic because I didn't experience that situation. That traumatic experience comes from that person's point of view. Our students, I had a young lady that was in an accident. She said she had to go on homeschool because she couldn't ride the bus anymore. She was traumatized. And I was like, what do you mean? Then think about it from that young lady's point of view. That was a traumatic experience. You know, to me, it didn't bother me a bit, but to her, she couldn't ride a bus anymore because it traumatized her. So these are all some of the factors that influence the way our individuals behave. There are many other factors out there, but these are just 8 of the ones that I think are kind of the most influential as far as I look at it, as far as I see it. Any questions? So we're going to look at tiers of intervention. I'm sure you've seen this triangle before, and this triangle is basically PBIS, Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. 80% of our students in our classroom will do fine with these Tier 1 or universal proactive strategies we put into place. Those are your class-wide rules and expectations, your procedures, your routines. Those are school-wide things that we put into place for everyone. Some of our kiddos struggle. Wait a minute, let me go back. Some of our kiddos still struggle after these core values are put into place or these core strategies are taught to our students. So we have Tier 2 or targeted interventions. Targeted interventions are small group interventions. Therefore, the 15% of the kids or less that need additional help besides those universal precautions or universal strategies we put into place. Now, if we use in Tier 1, and that doesn't work for little Dougie, we don't stop using Tier 1 strategies. we layer tier 2 strategies on top of the tier 1 strategies. They keep building on top of each other. You don't stop one just because they move to tier 2. In tier 3 are individualized strategies that are just what it says. They're intensive. They're usually one-on-one instruction for that student. This applies to behavior just as it does to academics as well. So with the individualized or tier 3 strategies, you usually do a functional behavior assessment and create a behavior intervention plan. Look for outside agencies to provide mental health services for those students, and then crisis response and things like that. So today we're going to be looking at, briefly, tier 1 strategies, because that's what we need to put into place, or those universal precautions or universal proactive strategies need to be put into place so that our school classroom and our school day runs smooth. Good? So some tier 1 strategies for all students is we're looking at our physical environment. You want to arrange the physical environment in your classroom so that you can see all students and so all students can see you. You want to arrange your physical environment so that the pathways or I guess that's what it would be. They could walk around your classroom without tripping over something. That makes a lot of sense there, doesn't it? So your materials are in one spot. They know where those materials are. They know where the pencil sharpener is. They know where the computer area is, and they can walk around your classroom without tripping and stumbling over anything. Just like you need to be able to move about your classroom without falling over anything or tripping over anything. We'll look at establishing and teaching expectation rules, procedures, and routines. I think we've talked a little bit about expectations and rules. Miss Rachel talked about your expectations should be few, no more than 5. They should start with a verb, and they should be what the student can do and not what the student can't do. So if you tell me no running, then I may skip down the hallway. If you tell me walking, please, then I know the expectation is to walk down the hallway. And also, if you look at procedures and routines, you need to look at procedures. What am I going to have a procedure for? What am I going to have something for a kid? If a student comes in to classroom late, what is that procedure for that student to come into the classroom, get the materials they need, and get to their seat and get to work? What are procedures for sharpening their pencil? What are procedures for using the restroom? What are hallway procedures? What are the cafeteria expectations and procedures? Look at all those things that you have to have a procedure for and how you're going to teach that. That's the key thing. You have to teach what you want to see. You have to teach the behavior you need, that you expect from your students. Active supervision is just basically moving around the classroom, observing and interacting with the students in your classroom. You know, we could stand up here in front of the class or sit at the desk all day. I'm supervising my students. No, if you're not walking around, talking around, or listening, which I'm not modeling very well, am I? If you're not walking around talking to your students and interacting with them, that's not active supervision. You need to be able to see and hear all students, and all students need to be able to see and hear you as well. And in continuum of responses for inappropriate behaviors, we start with the least restrictive alternative that we have as far as addressing the behavior and move to more restrictive alternatives. For instance, if it's pen clicking, the least restrictive thing I can do is ignore that. All right? What's the most restrictive thing I could do? Yeah, take that pen. Let me borrow that pen. Thank you. Put it in your pocket. Get rid of it, right? Send them out of the classroom. So if that's something that I could ignore, which I can pretty well. The ladies around here have a rough time because I'll sit up there and click, click, click. Then they have to call me out on it. So, but if it's something you can ignore, start with the least restrictive and work your way up to more restrictive. You don't want to back yourself into a corner and start with taking a kid's break the first thing that they start acting up, because then you got no bargaining tools. You got nothing to do but sit there with them during your break time as well. So, and then engagement and opportunities to respond. The more you have your students engaged, the more they're going to learn, and the less opportunities they have for behavior issues. And then opportunities to respond. different ways to respond. Like we were talking, like Miss Dion was talking the first session, using a whiteboard, using thumbs up, thumbs down, using the A, B, C, D, whatever, that all those different ways to have our students respond, choral responses, instead of individual response, have kids respond together. And the more opportunities to respond, the more likelihood of keeping that class moving at a perky pace, and the more likelihood of students being on task. Well, so what is classroom management? Classroom management can be defined as the actions teachers take to establish and sustain an environment that fosters students' academic achievement as well as their social, emotional, and moral growth. It's what you do in that classroom to make sure that those students are engaged and those students are learning. We talked a little bit about physical organization. The 3 keys of classroom management is the physical organization, of course, how you organize your classroom. The establishing your classroom rules. Once you establish those rules, you don't just write them on a poster and hang them on the wall. You establish your rules, you teach those rules, you practice those rules, you model those rules, you practice those rules, you provide students with corrective feedback if they need it, you reteach, you remodel, you repractice until the students understand what those rules are and what they look like in your classroom. And establishing routines and procedures. Again, going back to routines and procedures, they provide for safety in the classroom setting. Not only physical safety, but psychological safety as well. When the students aren't anxious, they feel safe enough that, school is a safe place for me. They're here to take care of me, to help me. So that psychological safety is very important to our students. An example of teaching establishing routines and procedures. I worked in a cafeteria for a while. In kindergarten, you have to teach them how to walk in the line, how to go through the cafeteria, get their tray, bring it out, set it down on their table. Have to teach them, how to open their spoons and how to eat and all this. And then you have to teach them how to clean up their area, dump their trash in the trash can, and stack their trays in the window. I had to teach that. We taught that. We went over that for a week. Every step that we did, I would repeat. Get your tray, find your seat, eat, clean up your area, throw away your trash, stack your tray. Every day for a month. Well, I missed one day. And whoever subbed for me did not review or did not tell them those procedures on how to go through lunch. And I came back the next day and we couldn't go through the cafeteria line. We couldn't find our seat. We had paper and trash all over the table and in the floor, and they stacked trays up. They were falling out on the floor and left on the table. And I was like, guys, what happened? Well, you didn't tell us. All right. I thought we went through this enough, but okay, get your tray, find your seat, eat, clean up your area, dump trash, stack your tray. Have a good day. Still had to continue saying that. And I think Miss Rachel mentioned earlier, after extended breaks when our kiddos come back, we've already taught our rules and expectations. Make sure you review those with our kids. Because just like me, I get out of that professional mode, get out of that work mode. My summertime mode is definitely different than what my school time mode is, and our kids are going to be the same way. So make sure that you review those expectations with them. Some guidelines when you're responding to minor disruptions. When we respond to some minor disruptions, we're going to be looking at using nonverbal responses. Now, minor disruptions, like I said, are those things where the kiddo just raises his hand all the time, wanting attention, clicking a pen, tapping the table. Those things are not really causing any harm or danger to anyone or hurting themselves. Those would be the minor disruptions that you want to look at. Some things that we want to look at are we want to use nonverbal responses as much as possible, and those nonverbal responses allow those kids to check their behavior without calling them out. And you already know if you call out a student in front of their peers, what are you going to get? You're going to get more inappropriate behaviors because you become in that power struggle. And so you don't want to do that. Minimize verbal responses, again, because the less words, the less talking that you do, the less it distracts from the lesson, the more appropriate it is for all the class. Don't interrupt the lesson flow. If it just walked by and tap a desk, that's all you need to do. Keep teaching, keep walking, keep talking. Keep checking everyone out, seeing what's going on. express very little emotion. A lot of times our kiddos find our buttons, right? What are those things that we find, I guess, sacred to us? And they keep pushing until they get a response from you that they've been looking for. Try to use as little emotion as possible when you're addressing minor disruptions. Remind, review, redevelop, or reteach your classroom expectations and procedures. Always remind them of those procedures. Even our older kids, when I was in the middle school, middle high, I'd have to remind them of hallway procedures every day. Last 5 seconds of class, right hand side of the hallway, hands to yourself quietly, please, thanks, have a great day. And that was it. Reminded them of those hallway procedures every day as a way of getting out of the classroom. Y'all have a great day. Always, end on the positive. So some ways that you can look at these nonverbal interventions, we can look at planned ignoring. Like I said earlier, if it's something I can ignore, I'm going to ignore it. If it's not hurting someone or myself or them or someone else, then ignore it. Sometimes when we're using signals with our kids, you got to develop those signals privately with those students so they understand what they are. You make eye contact. When you make eye contact, you're looking at that student knows that you're talking to them and that you're acknowledging them. Use facial expressions, like raise your eyebrow if you can do that, a frown, a smile, scowl, a rough look. Those facial expressions mean something to those students. And if you make that eye contact and use that facial expression, then they know exactly what you're talking about. Body language, how you carry yourself in the classroom, how you respond to a student. If a student is doing something that you don't like and you cross your arms, what kind of message is that sending? Usually it sends a message that I'm upset, that I don't like that. Stop that behavior. Hands behind your back. Watch that. Be cautious of that, because the kids that have been abused, you're hiding something that scares them. So hands to your side, open stance. Be willing to look them in the eye and make sure that they see that. Just to be aware of your body language and what effect it has on your kids and what you're portraying by body language. Gestures. I got this one right here that I use with my oldest son, because he gets out and starts telling stories on me and I got to do this number to him. Don't, man, hush, that's enough. He knows what that means by now because I've used it enough. So gestures, reel it in, get it back in the road, Different gestures that you can use with different kids. I had a young man that had a difficult time with asking for help. He didn't want to be considered not knowing what was going on. So instead of asking for help, he just closed his book and shut down. And so we figured out a gesture, and we were talking about storage wars or something. He and his grandpa went to an auction, and those guys were making bids by doing different things like that, And I was like, that's pretty cool. He said, yeah. He said, man, that one guy sat there and he did that. And so next thing I know, there's the other fellow over here doing this, and the price kept going up and up and up. He said, I didn't know what was going on, and Grandpa explained it to me. He said, they are making those bids by using those gestures. I said, I got an idea. I said, when you're having difficulty with a problem or difficulty with an assignment, you make that eye contact, touch your nose, I'll know to come over there and help you. If you touch your ear, I'll know you're fine. And we developed those gestures and came up with that, and if he needed help, he'd touch his nose. He'd look at me and touch his nose. Nobody else knew what was going on. I'd be right there. I'd walk over and give him the assistance that he needed. Those are some things that I worked out with that student. That worked for him. So just think about things, think outside the box. Environmental prompts. How many of us use environmental prompts? Prompts, like flip the light switch on and off once or whatever. Just tap a desk or point to a chair. Follow your pencil. If you want a student to move, could you follow your materials, please, and move that student to another seat. You didn't have to say, get up, I want you to move. Just follow your materials, follow your pencil. That way you're not calling them out, you're not bringing attention to the inappropriate behavior, you're just asking them to move. You're just using those environmental prompts to help them understand that I need to maybe change what I'm doing a little bit. Touch prompts, be very cautious with touch prompts. Again, if a student's been abused or a student's nervous, anxious, whatever, that touch could cause a tune-in behavior. What happened to them at a previous point in their life, that touch on the shoulder, what did that cause? So be very cautious using touch prompt. I had guys I worked with came from hospital settings or the court system. So I'd always have to ask them, if you're doing a good job, can I give you pat on the back, or can I give you a high five? You know, because one kid I did that to, and I came out there with a black eye. So just had to be aware that, oh yeah, look, where'd that come from? So from then on, I learned you got to ask that stuff. So with your kiddos that don't like to be touched, and if one of them said, don't touch me, don't touch that kid. I mean, you know, you're just looking for an explosion. And some sensory strategies. Those are those things that some of our kids on the spectrum have to have those sensory things, you know. Like, I had one, the fidgets, the fidget spinners, the little poppets now, I guess, are the big thing. I had one kid that he was pinched the fire out of him. And well, he thought he was just being mean, but what it was blue jeans. He loved the feel of denim. And if you got a hunk of your leg there, that was just an added bonus to him, man. But he loved the feel of denim. And we couldn't figure out what was going on. We just, like I said, thought he was being mean. And got to noticing when he wore his own blue jeans, he would do that. So if you wore blue jeans, you were going to get pinched. So what we did is we took some the pockets off a couple pairs, sewed them together, and put some hair gel and stuff inside of them, sewed them together. And that way he had that in his desk, that when he needed that sensory strategy, that sensory issue, he could use that under his desk. We had a kid, we taped Velcro under his desk because he liked the feel of Velcro. Put rubber bands across the front legs of the chair so the kid could bounce his feet against that rubber band. So those sensory strategies. And some of our kids have those. If you see a kid chewing a pencil up or whatever, there's sensory issues going on. So find out some ways that you can address those sensory issues. Some verbal interventions when we're talking about interacting with our students. Control your emotions. So like again, like I said, you got to control your emotions, because make sure the lens covers off. Control your emotions. That way you don't say something that you shouldn't, or you don't say something that you may regret later on. And like I said, students are going to find those things that you find personal to you, and they're going to keep pushing those buttons till they get a response from you. Benign confrontation is confronting a behavior without directly confronting a student. Everyone find a seat, please. You know, if Miss Chastity is up out of her seat walking around the classroom, I'm not going to say, Chastity, sit down. So everyone find a seat, please. Thank you. Everyone get your book open on page 4, whatever. I am addressing that inappropriate behavior, but I'm not calling that student out. So you're using that benign confrontation, they may want to walk just a little bit closer to that student. Use a little bit of proximity prompt. Page 4, please. Thank you. Good job. And then keep moving if they do what you ask them to do. The tone of your voice, I guess, would portray nervous, angry, upset. What tone of voice you use with your students, they can feed off that tone of voice. They know what you mean by the tone of voice that you're using. The rate of your voice, if you talk really fast, that usually means I'm really nervous. So if I slow down my talking, you know, if I talk fast, it's hard for folks to understand what I'm saying. If I slow and deliberate, it shows that I'm in control, I'm calm, and everything's good. I'm going to help you get through this situation. The volume of your voice should, you know, you're not going to use a whisper when you're in the cafeteria trying to get your kids to come to class. You're not going to scream and yell in the classroom when, you know, your students are all right there within earshot. So make sure that the volume of your voice matches the environment that you're in. And then counter-aggression, we already talked a little bit about that. Don't get into that power struggle. Don't say something to the kid and then they say something back to you, and then you say something back and then they say something back. Get caught up in that infinity of your reaction spurs a student's reaction, which makes you have a reaction, which causes the student another reaction. Sometimes it's best not to say anything at all. Just let the student talk. Sometimes our students need someone they can vent to. How many of you have to have that moment every now and then that you got to go find somebody that you can talk about? Exactly. Everybody. Students are no different. They have a lot of stressors. They have a lot of events going on within their life, and a lot of times they don't have someone that they can talk to. And so, like Miss Rachel was saying, they feel comfortable enough around you that they can lose their composure and say stuff and do things towards you because they know that you're not going to hurt them. You're going to try to help them be safe, and you're going to try to help them work through what they're going through. All right, we talked a little bit about the signals, making eye contact, facial expressions, wait, I'm going backwards. No wonder we talked about that. Sorry. So physical proximity, we use that a little bit. Just walk closer to the students that are off task or not doing what you ask them to do. May work, may not. If it doesn't, use silence. Just stop right in the middle of what you're saying until the students acknowledge what's going on and they quieten down, hopefully, get back on task. Physical cues, again, physical cues would be just point to a seat, just walk over and taking a pencil and reaching them a pencil. Physical cues are those things that you can do to get them back on track. Post-it notes, like Miss Rachel was saying, you can use a post-it note for the positive, but you can also remind them of the expectations during the classroom. You remember, classroom expectations, when the teacher's talking, eyes on the speaker. Walk by, just reach them that. You didn't call them out, you didn't say anything, but they read that and they know, yeah, I need to follow this expectation. This is what we need to do. The teacher look, I always called that the mama look. I get the mama look from them as a whole. I get that now still, along with some other gestures, so I know when to behave. So, but that look, we're not amused by that behavior. We're not, what are you doing? How's that contributing to class? Instead of calling them out, just like, and then they'll hopefully know what you're talking about. You've already worked that out, and they are ready to get back on track. Quickly state the student's name. If you quickly state their name, then go on. Don't overuse that though, because they'll do stuff just to hear you say their name. So, quickly state their name and then continue on with class. And then again, planned ignoring as well. All right, so one last thing, and then we'll answer any questions, or we'll have any comments or whatever you want to talk about. So this is he was a child psychologist, I think. I can't say Chaim Gano. I tried. I listened to it on the encyclopedia thing, say it, and I still can't say it. But anyway, I've come to a frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element in the classroom. It's my personal approach that creates the climate. It's my daily mood that makes the weather. As a teacher, I possess a tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or heal. And in all situations, it's my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated and a child humanized or dehumanized. So who has control of that classroom? Who has the most power in that classroom? You, as the teacher. Right. And that's a big responsibility. And like it says, you set the weather. You make sure those kids have a good day, or you can make sure those kids have a rough day or a bad day. And hopefully you decide that you want every day to be a good day, because those rough days, man, you just take that stuff home with you, and then you got to deal with it there, and then you bring it back the next day. I hope at the end of the day, you leave school at school. You got too much going on at home and too much going on in the other aspects of your life than to take school home with you. Yes, we worry about little Dougie not having anything to eat before he comes back to school on Monday, but you can't let that be all that you think about. You got to take care of yourself. And I hope that every day, the next morning starts a clean slate. Those kiddos need that clean slate. Don't hold those grudges. Don't be upset.
I would say I can't save the world. I go home.
Yeah.
Clear my mind. I would say I can't save the world.
Right. You got to save yourself.
I do the same thing that you're talking about. I should go home and I'd be thinking about
Yeah, you
the
can't.
students that I knew were
Yeah.
not treated.
Oh, yeah.
Should be not be like, I can't save the world.
Right. But you still have compassion for those students and empathy. And the next morning,
Son, you
yeah. And the next morning when you come back, it's a whole new day.
do what you can.
Yeah.
Say,
Yeah, that's it. And you're usually the bright spot in their students' day, in their kiddos' days, because you're the constant. You're going to be there. You got the same consistent behavior day in and day out. Hopefully you have that same excitement to see little Dougie in the morning, even though he was a pain in the butt all day yesterday, and he will be. Hopefully you're excited to see him the next morning and say, hey, I am so excited you're here. I know school started for a bunch of us, school's starting for some of us. Greet your students with, man, I heard so much about you guys last year. I'm so excited to have you in my class this year. I can't wait for the adventures that we have. and just build those kids up. Because you start off on the right foot, then you're going to have a positive school year. You start off, negative, trying to be you start off negative, then your school year is going to be rough. Any questions? Comments? If I don't get a round of applause, I'm going to be upset. I will ask for it. Nobody else will. I will ask for it. Let's finish this this QR code, please. This is the feedback. Thank you, folks, so much. I hope you have a great school year. If there's anything that we can do to help you, my name's Doug Smith at hazard.kyschools.us. Miss Chastity Craft at chastity.craft@theholler.org, right? And then we had Stephanie.kid at floyd.kyschools.us, Denny